Lily Sullivan was 32 years old, and although her last name opened doors in Connecticut, she had always been treated as the silent shadow of the family. Since her adolescence, when her mother Margaret handed her a notebook like an invisible chain, she became the one in charge of making sure everything was in its place, the tablecloth unwrinkled, the candles aligned, the glasses sparkling. She was never presented as a talented woman, but rather as the one who helps around the house, or worse, the one who couldn't find her way. Her younger sister Sarah was displayed like a shining trophy at every social gathering, while Lily disappeared behind the kitchen doors. In the eyes of everyone else, she was just the cog that kept the machine running. What no one imagined was that secretly she had built an empire called Stellar Events, with 50 employees, million-dollar contracts, and a prestige that extended across the country. The day that changed everything began on a freezing December, the kind that bites your skin even if you're wearing a coat. Lily checked her calendar and saw marked in red, "Meeting, VC Holdings, 3 p.m., Miami." It wasn't just any appointment. It was the opportunity of a lifetime with Victoria Chen, an executive renowned for transforming mid-sized businesses into national benchmarks. Lily had been preparing the dossier for weeks, studying every detail, down to Victoria's favorite flowers for events. It was 8:12 a.m. when her phone rang. A text from Margaret. "We need you to cook today. Christmas dinner at home. 25 executives. Come early." That word, need, wasn't a request. It was a disguised order. Lily put her coffee cup on the counter, looked at the plane ticket, and felt the vertigo of a decision that could redefine her story. Continue being the invisible maid, or fly toward the life she had truly built in secret. She stared at her phone's illuminated screen for a few seconds, as if the entire weight of the 32 years she'd carried depended on that notification. Margaret didn't ask, she demanded, and she did so with the confidence of someone who always had her daughter available to fill in the gaps. Lily opened her airline email, confirmed her check-in, and felt a strange relief, as if every click were an act of rebellion. At the same time, a pang of fear ran through her chest. She knew the threat of being erased from the family would arrive in a matter of minutes. That family that had never wanted to see her, Worth now wanted her to sacrifice the greatest opportunity of her career, to serve canapes on the same old china. As she closed her suitcase, the scent of coffee still floated in the air, mingling with the anxiety that rose like a lump in her throat. She dressed in a dark blue suit she'd chosen to convey a sense of firmness, the same one that reminded her that she was no longer the aimless daughter, but a businesswoman in her own right. Every crease in her clothes was a reminder that this day would mark a turning point. As she left the house, the cold air hit her face like a warning. Nothing would be the same upon her return. She walked toward the taxi with a firm step, silently telling herself that she was the master of her destiny, not the cook of someone else's banquet. The airport was crowded with families carrying gifts, children wearing overly long scarves, and executives hurrying with their leather briefcases. Lily, amidst the Christmas chaos, felt strangely light. She had made a decision she had been putting off for years, to choose herself. While waiting in the security line, she reviewed the presentation on her tablet for the umpteenth time, each slide designed with the same care with which she had once folded napkins in the family home. Only now, those pages could open up million-dollar contracts and the possibility of no longer being invisible forever. On the plane, as the flight attendants closed compartments and the murmur of passengers filled the cabin, Lily took out a small black notebook. Inside, she had written in tight handwriting the ideas that had made stellar events a benchmark: immersive experiences, unexpected details, perfection in execution. She looked at those notes like someone reviewing a map before crossing an ocean. It wasn't just a business, it was proof that she had managed to transform humiliation into a driving force. And as the aircraft took off over frozen Connecticut, she felt she was leaving behind not only a state, but also decades of imposed silence. Hundreds of miles away, at the Sullivan Mansion, the atmosphere was chaotic. Margaret was giving hurried orders, Sarah was complaining about her makeup not matching the lighting in the room, and the invited executives were beginning to arrive with polite smiles and suppressed hunger. The kitchen was empty, the ovens were off, and the table, though impeccably set, lacked the essentials: food. Lily's absence felt like a void impossible to fill. Her mother, her nerves on edge, improvised excuses while the waiters bustled about aimlessly, unable to understand a plan that never existed without her. Tensions exploded when, finding no solution, Sarah ordered last-minute pizzas. Minutes later, greasy boxes arrived on noisy motorcycles and were served on porcelain plates, surrounded by cut crystal glasses. The guests, renowned executives, exchanged awkward glances that spoke volumes more than any polite comment. And among them was Victoria Chen, silently, observing, with the calm of someone who knows that disaster reveals more than perfection. She even heard Margaret, in a desperate attempt to justify the situation, mutter that Lily was unstable and a failure. Each word fell heavy in the air, like a judgment delivered in front of the wrong witness. Meanwhile, Lily landed in Miami, her heart racing and her hands freezing despite the humid heat escaping through the airport doors. The contrast was so stark that she felt she'd changed worlds. She was leaving the snow of Connecticut behind and entering a vibrant city full of palm trees and movement. She took a taxi to the hotel where she would meet Victoria Chen, and during the drive, she mentally reviewed the key points of the negotiation. Each stoplight was a reminder that there was no turning back. This was her ultimate gamble, and losing it would confirm everything her family had always said about her. In the hotel lobby, the air conditioning smelled of citrus and the warm lights. Reflected off the mirrored marble floors, Lily sat in a leather armchair, her back straight, her dossier resting on her knees. While she waited, she watched the other guests, tourists in colorful shirts, executives walking as if chasing invisible clocks. She knew that at that moment, she carried on her shoulders not only the reputation of her company, but also the opportunity to prove she wasn't anyone's servant. And if you've read this far, tell us which city you're joining us from. It's incredible to discover how far these stories travel. Victoria appeared with the surgical punctuality of those who manage empires. She wore an ivory suit that contrasted with her dark hair pulled back in a low bun, and her footsteps echoed firmly on the marble of the lobby. Seeing her, Lily felt a knot in her stomach, but also the clarity of someone who knows she's exactly where she should be. They greeted each other with a firm handshake, and Victoria bluntly told her that she already knew his work, that she had silently followed him for months, and that she wanted to hear from him how he had built such an unmistakable style in the events industry. The conversation flowed naturally. They discussed logistics, sensory experiences, and how each event should tell a story that would be etched in the guests' memories. Victoria listened attentively, nodding with a slight smile each time Lily detailed an innovation she had implemented at stellar events. It wasn't a small talk, it was a dialogue of equals, between two women who knew what it meant to make their way in a world where many expected them to fail. For the first time in years, Lily felt she wasn't justifying her existence, but rather sharing a vision that another brilliant mind understood and valued. In Connecticut, the consequences of the Christmas disaster were multiplying. Guests murmured about the Sullivan family's improvisation, and some even shared photos of the pizzas served on crystal dishes, which became a joke on social media. Sarah, her makeup smeared with sweat and frustration, tried to maintain her composure, but each comment only made her sink further. Margaret, on the other hand, took refuge in arrogance, claiming it was all part of a modern, relaxed concept. But the damage was done. The executives who had come looking for elegance had instead found themselves in an unforgettable farce. Victoria, from her privileged seat at the table, had seen every detail. And what caught her attention most wasn't the pizza on china plates, but the way Margaret spoke of her own daughter, reducing her to unstable and a failure. This contradiction intrigued her. How was it possible that the woman who had built an innovative and admired company could be treated like a nuisance by her own family? That question hovered in her mind like a puzzle piece that hadn't yet fit, but would soon find its place with surprising clarity. The next day, in a private meeting room with floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the Miami Ocean, Victoria arrived with a different expression, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. She spread some documents on the table and, before discussing figures, asked a direct question. How did you manage to create something so solid without anyone seeming to notice? Lily, for the first time, allowed the truth to come out unfiltered. She recounted how she had worked in silence, enduring family humiliation while building stellar events from scratch. Her voice trembled at first, but soon became firm because she knew she no longer needed to hide her story. Victoria leaned back in her chair, smiling wryly. She confessed that she had been at the Sullivan mansion the night before and had heard with her own ears how they had slandered her. Then, with an almost theatrical gesture, she connected the dots. She realized that the invisible daughter they were talking about was, in fact, the mastermind behind the company she so admired. The scene was so unexpected that they both laughed, not in mockery, but in disbelief. The contract was signed that same day, $2 million that not only represented growth, but also the validation of years of hidden effort. Lily felt the weight of decades melt away in seconds when she saw her name stamped next to Victoria Chen's. That night in her hotel room, she allowed herself to cry. They weren't tears of sadness, but of liberation. For the first time, she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her success spoke for itself. The girl relegated to folding napkins had become the woman who dictated the rules of the game. Weeks later, the Forbes cover appeared on newsstands, her face illuminated under the headline, 40 Under 40. The photograph showed Lily in an elegant emerald dress with a serene smile, that of someone who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. In Connecticut, the magazine circulated like a silent slap in the face in social circles where it had previously been invisible. Sarah was losing. Clients, Margaret was removed from committees, and the Sullivan name was becoming more associated with scandal than prestige. The irony was cruel. The daughter they never valued was now the one sustaining the family's public narrative. The Sullivans' social decline was swift and merciless. Invitations to events that had once been a regular occurrence began to evaporate, and calls that used to ring insistently turned into awkward silences. Sarah tried to cling to her star image with social media posts, but the comments were filled with comparisons to Lily, who was now synonymous with success and authenticity. Margaret, unable to accept reality, looked for culprits everywhere except in the mirror. Meanwhile, Lily worked day and night expanding stellar events, adding projects that previously seemed unattainable, and hiring more people who believed in her vision. A climax came when Victoria, with her characteristic sense of irony, decided to personally call Margaret. In a courteous but pointed tone, she informed her that she had closed a multi-million-dollar contract with Lily and that from now on she preferred to deal directly with her. The news fell like a hammer blow on the Connecticut mansion. Margaret couldn't hide her fury and shame while Sarah listened incredulously from the staircase. That call was public confirmation of something that had already become evident. Power had changed hands, and the family that always humiliated Lily was exposed to its own hypocrisy. Over the months, Lily transformed Stellar Events into an international benchmark. She not only closed contracts in the United States, but also in Europe and Latin America. Her schedule was filled with invitations to conferences, interviews, and talks at universities, where she was presented as an example of resilience and leadership. In each setting, Lily spoke simply, sharing what she had learned about the value of boundaries and the importance of not letting anyone define your place in the world. Her words resonated powerfully because they were born from real scars, not self-help manuals. Meanwhile, the Sullivans retreated into their own silence. Margaret, faced with the loss of her social standing, began receiving rejections in spaces where she had once reigned supreme. Sarah, without the support of clients or admirers, saw her image as a star slowly fade. It was a cruel reversal of fate. The invisible daughter shone brightly, while the favorite faded into the shadows. Lily, however, wasn't seeking explicit revenge. Her goal was deeper. She wanted to demonstrate that dignity is sustained by actions and that respect once claimed cannot be negotiated back. The opportunity to directly confront her family came almost a year later at a meeting Lily organized in her own Manhattan apartment. It was a modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the flaming city and a dining room designed to impress, not with ostentation, but with poise and elegance. She invited her parents and Sarah in a neutral, almost corporate tone. Not a romantic get-together, but a formal meeting. Before they sat down at the table, she made it clear that if they wanted to maintain any kind of connection with her, there would be rules, respect, a public apology, and a commitment to family therapy. The tension was palpable. Margaret, accustomed to dictating, shifted uncomfortably in her chair, unable to process that her eldest daughter was now setting the rules. Sarah lowered her gaze, defeated, like someone accepting that the admiration of others was no longer on her side. The catering service entered the room, uniformed waiters serving refined dishes on an immaculate table. For the first time, Lily wasn't the one running around. She sat calmly, watching others take care of everything. That image, more than any speech, made clear the definitive reversal of roles. The silence was broken when Margaret, her voice trembling, admitted that she had never imagined the magnitude of Lily's work. It wasn't a complete apology, but it was a start. Sarah, through pent-up tears, acknowledged that she had enjoyed privileges built on her sister's invisibility. For Lily, those words didn't erase the past, but they marked a crack in the wall of contempt she had endured for years. She watched the scene with a mixture of pain and relief. Finally, albeit belatedly, she had heard a minimal acknowledgement of the truth she had always carried alone. Dinner continued in a sober, almost solemn tone. The dishes arrived one after another, served with millimetric precision by the caterer, while the family remained silent, facing the discomfort of seeing themselves in a mirror they couldn't avoid. For Lily, that moment wasn't a noisy reckoning, but rather confirmation that she had achieved what she always sought: autonomy, respect, and the certainty that her worth didn't depend on those who never wanted to see it. When she raised her glass to toast, she did so with a brief, firm phrase, "To new beginnings, with dignity and without masks." That evening, as they said goodbye, Lily closed the door behind her parents and Sarah with a serenity she'd never felt before. There were no shouts or reproaches, no false promises, just a tacit agreement that the family bond, if it was to survive, must be rebuilt from a different foundation. Looking at the still-set table and the echo of freshly emptied glasses, she realized she had achieved the unthinkable, not only freeing herself from the role of invisible servant, but also rewriting the power dynamics in her own history. Over time, the image of that dinner became a close symbol. Every time she faced a new professional or personal challenge, she recalled the scene of the waiters serving her parents and Sarah. It was living proof that the roles could be reversed when one had the courage to say no at the right moment. For her, the true victory lay not in watching them fall, but in standing tall. And so, her story became an inspiration to many, a reminder that respect isn't asked for, it's demanded with actions. In the following weeks, the first family therapy sessions began. It wasn't magical or cinematic. Agendas that clashed, silences that weighed more than any discussion, and questions that made everyone uncomfortable. Margaret, for example, clung to the phrase, "That's how I was raised," as if it were an eternal alibi. The therapist invited her to differentiate between explanation and justification, and that nuance opened a crack through which some light entered. Sarah, for her part, recognized that the admiration she always sought was a borrowed mirror, and that without Lily's invisible support, her facade crumbled. Lily listened, set boundaries, and for the first time didn't take on tasks that weren't hers. On the professional front, Stellar Events launched a mentoring program for young people without contact networks. Those talents who are often left out of the rooms, where great opportunities are forged. Lily chose to call it Backstage to Center Stage, a nod to her own journey from the kitchen to the head of the table. Each story that entered the program reinforced her conviction that excellence is not the heritage of surnames, but of discipline and imagination. As the project grew, so did her peace of mind. She had found a concrete way to transform grievance into a platform for others. An unexpected email arrived one rainy morning, an invitation to give. The keynote address at a Hartford public school. The auditorium smelled of fresh varnish and new notebooks, and the seats were filled with students taking notes on cracked phones and sticker-covered folders. Lily spoke without grandiloquence. She told of impossible schedules, of mistakes that forced her to redesign routes, of contracts that almost fell through, and of the cunning she learned by not being seen. Finally, a girl with tightly braided hair told her she'd never imagined herself leading teams until that day. Lily walked out onto the street, her umbrella tilted and a lukewarm certainty. Sometimes reparation comes disguised as a gift for others. Her relationship with her family found a prudent course. It wasn't idyllic, it couldn't be, but it was clear. They agreed to the rules, no imposed tasks, no minimizing their work, and a real commitment to therapy and public apologies when appropriate. Margaret began writing short, unadorned letters in which she acknowledged specific moments of contempt, the "we need you to come" that was never a request, the embarrassing introductions where Lily was reduced to the one who helps. Sarah, more silent, asked for a separate meeting to discuss her fear, the fear of being nobody without the showcase of family. Lily listened, and they both agreed to an honest deal that didn't erase the past, but prevented it from being repeated. December arrived again, with its parade of lights and endless lists. This time, the Christmas dinner would be held in a Manhattan hall that Stellar Events often rented for clients, but where Lily was now the host. She didn't cook, she didn't iron tablecloths, she didn't check centerpieces. She coordinated equipment with the ease of someone who knew every detail of the machine, and she allowed herself to enjoy herself as a guest at her own party. As her parents entered, a team of waiters, not the same one from that symbolic night, but with identical precision, showed them to their table. Margaret took her hand for a second and said, barely audible, "Thank you for inviting us." It wasn't grandiloquent, but it was new. When the clock struck midnight, the toasts lacked the pomp of old Connecticut or the drama of public reconciliations. They were sober toasts, the kind that caress rather than dazzle. Victoria Chen approached with a knowing smile, raised her glass, and joked with the precision of someone who appreciates detail. What a relief not to see pizzas on china today. They both laughed, not out of mockery, but out of perspective. Lily thought about the line she had vowed never to cross again, the line of putting her life on hold to uphold other people's reputations. She looked around, team, friends, family under new rules, and knew the end of that old plot had already been written. The next morning, with the city still collecting streamers from the sidewalks, Lily tidied her desk. She filed the first draft of the mentoring program into one folder, the progress of the next international contract into another, and left a simple note visible: respect, non-negotiable. It was her daily reminder, her loving boundary. When she stepped outside, the winter wind nipped at her cheeks and she smelled freshly baked bread from a corner bakery. She felt a physical, almost muscular calm, as if her body had finally caught up with her mind. Victory wasn't a trophy, she thought. It was that firm step that doesn't ask permission. And with that step, she kept walking.